Hey everybody, so it is finally happening. Today I am going to be reviewing The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. This film came out in the year 2001. It was directed by Peter Jackson. I have been bugged about this over time, probably since the beginning, which makes sense because naturally, as fans of mine from the beginning know, my original handle was not deepfocuslens, it was Loader Lover MR. Now, I created this handle way before I ever planned on having a YouTube channel or anything like that. It was just a name to call myself online. I was a teenager and Lord of the Rings was, to me at the time, the greatest thing I had ever seen. It really did inspire me, and it was, huge in terms of contributing to my passion for film and filmmaking, which is, like most millennials, most people of my generation, just like the generation before had Star Wars. Everybody has their thing. Lord of the Rings was our big, ambitious sort of fantasy epic. I used to watch the films every year for the anniversary of when they came out, and I made my family sign contracts, printed contracts, where they could not bother me during the film, they couldn't make jokes, they couldn't make noises. I'm not kidding. I've seen each film easily over 50 times, but I never really thought about reviewing it, strangely. I think a big part of that is just because it doesn't really, once I become an adult, I moved on from it, definitely. I haven't seen it in years, and there are other films that interest me, other films that kind of feel more like my personality when it comes to, the channel I have on here. So it just, it never really occurred to me until people started asking me why, if my name was Loader Lover for so long, why have I not reviewed them? But I figured it was time to return to it. I've been wanting to return a little bit more to the films that influenced me as a kid. But Lord of the Rings, at the time that it was made and when it came out, was just, it just wasn't done. It really did change the way movies were made from that point on, at least in the mainstream. It was just one of those miracles, one of those once in a generation success stories where you just know it's crazy enough that it actually did happen. And, you got a guy named Peter Jackson who was, relatively unknown in the United States. He's a self-taught director from New Zealand, and he started out making a lot of cheesy B horror type films, real over the top. And then he decides to kind of move on and do something a little bit more artistic with the film Heavenly Creatures, which got a lot of critical acclaim. And then he did, I think, receive an Academy Award nomination for it, for writing with his partner Fran Walsh. And from there, he is able to gain the rights to the Lord of the Rings, the trilogy of books, and make them into a film, which is, quite an ambitious leap overall compared to the films on his resume before that. But New Line Cinema, amazingly, gave him a lot of creative control, and that's not something that I think that could happen today. Certainly not realistically, and this was a massive gamble that paid off. And for Peter Jackson as well, it's a kind of a strange career he's had, but this was just kind of that lightning in a bottle situation, because I don't think he's remotely captured that same magic twice with anything he's made since. Is it a fluke? No, I would not say so. But I will say that I think this is one of those examples of a film that really did rely on a lot of happy accidents, and that does happen a lot. I think it's a combination of a lot of luck, knowing the right people, but also having a major passion, a childlike vigor for the subject matter, I think really contributed to it. And that certainly was Peter Jackson. And at the time, fantasy film just was not a big thing in terms of Hollywood blockbusters. It was not something that was a big moneymaker, and nothing had been nearly as ambitious as this. And now watching it 20 years later, after it's been released, I think that there are aspects of it that I think are extremely ambitious and amazing to watch in hindsight, just to realize how ballsy it really was. A lot of ambition went into this film. A lot. It's really, really astounding. And that was the kind of thing as a child that just moved me, inspired me. It reminds you of the golden age of Hollywood, back when all of these really elaborate, ambitious sets could be created. Like from the era of like D.W. Griffith, like Intolerance. And back then, of course, things were being done for the very first time. So that was true gutsiness, certainly. But I think this movie did, in a lot of ways, have pure balls, pure ambition. At least from a large, more conceptual perspective. Is it a perfect film? Hell no. Absolutely not. Not even close. It has a lot of high points, and there are some really excellent filmmaking going on here and there for sure. And then at other times, it can be a little bit awkward or a little bit forced. Overstuffed might be a better term to use. But I think that as far as the Fellowship of the Ring goes, I think it's by far the most consistent, just from a structural perspective. Over time, I think it's become quite evident that Peter Jackson is maybe not the best editor around. He can be a bit self-indulgent, and I think even people that are fans of him would agree with that. But The Fellowship seems to suffer the least, I think, from those pacing issues that he has. It just feels the most well-balanced. The arcs are more clear, and the payoffs, I think, are the most resonant in this film. And I know a lot of people, especially at the time, people complained about it being a long movie. You know, for me as somebody who has seen so many epics from the old days they tend to be longer, you know, obviously the length doesn't bother me here. But I also never really understood that, because I feel like this movie is there's just so much going on here. There's so much ground to cover. I don't think it could be any shorter. I think if anything, it needs to be longer. It should be like a series, a mini series, you know, something like, you know, Game of Thrones. There's just richness here, you know, in terms of the history, the places, the characters, and how do you throw all of that history at us at once and expect us to follow it, understand this world in this way in such a short period of time? And I think that's probably the film's biggest issue, and it's in the first half of the film, just trying to cram so much into it. Though it does grow, I think, stronger and stronger and hones in kind of on the things that are the most important, and that's actually kind of rare. Rarely do I say that a film gets stronger as it goes, so I give him credit. But the opening, there's a lot coming at you. It is very rushed. It's very, very skimmed over. It's like the Spark Notes version of Middle Earth. Some of it's not very clear, and there's just little things here and there I think lack context where I think it's desperately needed. That's kind of why definitely why I think I prefer the extended edition to the theatrical release. I think it just really hones in a little bit more on the character motivations, and it's not adding like a ton of material, but just the little scenes here and there, and even just like little, you know, 10 seconds that they're adding, it gives me so much more, I think, to go off of. You know, a good example, I think the extended edition serves Aragorn and Boromir very well in terms of their relationship and the tension that's brewing. Even just through those brief little interactions, you just feel like you understand the world a lot better, and it resonates more emotionally. One thing that I do find very interesting is that it seems that a lot of Jackson's past, in terms of his style, when he's making a lot of those low-budget horror movies, is kind of leaking in to this film. Just, you know, the practical effects and some of the exaggerated camera shots, the acting being really cheesy and all that. And he seems to really be amping up the camp factor here, the cartoonish aspects within the film. It's very unique tonally. It's not always consistent. At times I think it's very, very strong, where everything is just really coming together, that the music and everything, it's very hypnotic, and at other times it just kind of misses the mark. And it can be in small things. For example, like the color grading at times really bothers me. It's really just a little bit too much and a tad on the nose. I think of like Rivendell as an example. There are times when I think it's lit well, but other times it's just way too bright and the skin is all washed out. I think it comes off as really dated and inauthentic. But then again, I think of the Woods of Lothlorien, which have an exaggerated quality to it, and yet it really works. There's something about that, the mystique of it, the intrigue. It's both ethereal yet haunting, and I think they really go all the way with it. I think of all the sections in the film, for me, my favorite and what I think is the most effective would be the scene in the Mines of Moria. And, you know, the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, I think is just really fantastic and really dramatic. It's rousing and emotional in all the right ways, and it has that charm to it with the over-the-top-ness of it. And a gorgeous score. I love the design of the Balrog, and for the most part, I think it does look pretty good, at least in the master shots. And I love that when Gandalf falls, I love that they give it that chance to really be silent. That's really effective. They allow for the moment to resonate. I love the music in that part, especially when they come out and, you know, they're in the light, and just a beautiful location as well. And those are the things that I think are the most mature about the Fellowship of the Ring. I think the emotional moments in the other films can get a little bit too sentimental, whereas this one I think kind of strikes a perfect balance. Lets the moment sink in, but not too much, and they have the proper build-up. You know, the locations, like this particular site is gorgeous, but the cinematography, you know, it is questionable at times, but a lot of times the major shots of the landscapes and everything are just gorgeous for New Zealand. This is a New Zealand advertisement. And it's a brilliant location, I think, because how often are movies shot in New Zealand, you know, especially at the time? It wasn't something that people really considered. Normally you'd think making a movie like this, they'd shoot it in Europe. But no, it's the uniqueness of this landscape. It's like a place you can't quite put your finger on. Like if you were to watch this film without any context, you'd be like, where are they? And it's a refreshing change. I think it adds to the otherworldliness of everything. And in New Zealand, there's a lot more kind of wildlife and areas that aren't as explored as maybe they would be in Europe. So, you know, you have a wealth of locations. So all of that is amazing. And I cannot say enough about, you know, especially the props and the makeup and the costumes and everything, like just how much effort went into this film, especially for the, you know, the aesthetics. It's amazing. Yet I do admit, as an adult, a lot of me wishes that The Lord of the Rings could have been made by somebody other than Peter Jackson. In a perfect world, in a world where kind of I think the industry was a lot different, I would have preferred for someone a little bit more mature. Somebody who really had that patience and that confidence in the patience to really allow it to build the characters, show attention to silence in a more kind of cerebral, more artistic sort of way. I'm thinking like somebody like David Lean from the old days, who of course directed, you know, Lawrence of Arabia. Or I think about like Ron by Kurosawa. So, you know, I love that those people can make silences so cinematic. They can make just the most subtle moments dramatic. And I think that's more effective through like slow tension building, yet there's such a flat landscape that you're seeing. And I think it's just an extraordinary contradiction, amazing ambition. And it's that type of mature and sophisticated filmmaking that I think would elevate this material to new heights. But of course, you know, a movie like Lawrence of Arabia could never be successful in this day and age. Never. And it could never be made today, certainly. It has to be easily palatable because the movie industry is just not what it was. So yeah, if somebody like David Lean could get their hands on Lord of the Rings, there's a masterpiece possible here. As it stands, you know, Lord of the Rings in Peter Jackson's version reminds me more of like Gone with the Wind. I think it has more in common with Gone with the Wind. Same attention to the big kind of cartoony sort of melodrama, but also having major ambition. It is very, very effective. With Gone with the Wind, it is very dated, certainly. It's definitely a product of its era, and yet there's something about it. It's like when I watch it, I have to devour that shit. I love it. There's a comfort to it, and I have a similar sort of feeling with Lord of the Rings. There's a charm and a comfort to that goofiness. Though it does surprise me at times, you know, it's not always so goofy. I think the scene at the end where Boromir dies is a really powerful one. It closes this particular installment of the trilogy really nicely, having that at the end, really giving it attention that it deserves. And the way that the story is built up to that point, you really feel it because you know that at this moment, the Fellowship is going to splinter in all kinds of different directions. And so it's a very bittersweet moment. And then you're able to transition into the moment where, of course, Frodo is deciding to go alone and Sam decides to go with him. I think it's just kind of a nice, kind of perfect bridge there. So yeah, you know, I think returning to it after a while, you know, since I've seen it all the way through at least, you know, I think it's still very strong, as I said. Is it always paced well? No. Is every scene a winner? No. But I think for everything they attempted to do here, especially in a first film where you have that big task of setting up the world in a way that makes us care about it, covering all of that ground, maintaining a sort of balance, and really, for the most part, having a very cohesive, clear story, it excels in that way. And that is the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I am an artist and I sell commissioned portraits and prints of my work. So if that's something you are interested in, you can just go to the website and look at the shop. And if you have any questions about it, like in a commission or something, you can certainly email me. My email is in the description box below. Also, I'd like to give a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much. If you are interested in becoming a patron, there is a link for that below, as well as all my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.